Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the Greg's Garage Pod with co-host Jason Pridmore. I'm Greg. Happy New Year, Jason.
Happy New Year to you too, Greg. What'd you do? Did you do anything exciting?
No, I didn't do anything exciting, actually. Just, I think I played video games until like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Did you really? What'd you play?
I play Forza Horizon, the newest one. So I just race cars and race other people all around England, jolly old England this time.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the deal where you got it set up to go through your TV and all that, and you talk to people and all that.
Well, I don't actually put a microphone on my head and talk anymore because I don't like getting abused by 12-year-old little boys that are angry with no parental supervision. They make, they yell and make fun. And I'm actually good at racing. Where that happens, if I ever play a first-person shooter game, it's just demoralizing. Yep. Demoralizing. I kicked out of rooms. I got 8-year-olds screaming at me. I don't even bother. It's horrible.
Did you? Out of all that, I got. You said that you were good at racing, and that it caught me for a second. So the rest of it, I kind of didn't really hear. So you're good at racing, and then the shoot up games, you get shot at first.
Well, yeah, I get shot at first. I mean, I just standing right in front of bullets. Apparently, I'm just no good, no good at all. Yeah, no, I don't. You got to be really whatever. You know what I mean?
No, you know what? The thing is, I've been wanting to do it because I used to do that all the time. I used to play video games all the time, especially when I was injured and laying up, which was most of my career. It seemed like, right? I knew you were going there.
You know what? No, you won a couple championships, so you were healthy for at least a few years.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, I feel like the addiction would be so real now. Like, I don't think I'd ever leave my house. If I could get into some of those race games where, imagine if we had you and me and a few of our boys all yelling and screaming at each other during a race, I just think it'd be hard to leave the house. I'd have so much fun doing that.
Back in the Two Wheel Tuesday days when, I was doing that show and I had some days off in the middle of the week. I mean, I was spending so much time playing MotoGP 2, I think. Started a league with some friends online, worked at Speed, got Speed swag. It was a total obsession. It was absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous, Jason. But you know what?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something before we go on, that this podcast this week is sponsored by ARAI. And even though ARAI Helmets meets all safety standards, they don't just build a helmet for safety alone. Comfort is huge, and a better fitting helmet not only is more comfortable, but it protects you better. With multiple available interior shapes and an extensive range of interior liners and removable cheek pads, your ARAI helmet can be customized to deliver the perfect fit for you. Visit ARAIAmericas.com for more information about tech, fit, and paint jobs. There you go. Any news you want to talk about before we kind of roll into the main part of this thing?
Well, like we know that you saw that Lorenzo, there was a video out about Lorenzo. I know you know a little bit more about that. I was reading something really interesting this week on Bike Sport News about Dovizioso casting doubts on the MotoGP Dream Team. And a couple things caught my attention on that because, look, everybody thinks I'm a Dovi hater. I'm not. I actually really have a lot of respect for him as not only as a rider, but, it seems like a really good dude too. But there was some things that he was saying on it that caught my attention because I think our biggest worry for Ducati this year is the development side of it, where they're going to go with it. They've lost Stoner, they've lost Lorenzo, and I've even seen some comments within basically saying kind of the same thing. But reading what Dovizioso has to say, he says, now we are one of the best mix of rider and bike. We have some very good characteristics, better than the competitor, but still in some other parts we are worse. We couldn't win in Aragon, which confirmed we still have some issues. It was clear that we had to improve. He goes on to say that Jorge made a big step, and as normal, it affected him because he wasn't doing enough. He goes, when you have two riders for the World Championship, we push each other, and it is a positive for the development of the bike, but it also created tension. This is a way to lose points. I think that reading some of this stuff, and he goes on to say, his last quote is, on paper, Honda is the best team, but it doesn't mean they will be the strongest team. I completely disagree with that. Honda is the strongest team going into MotoGP into 2019. And I think that anybody that would say anything different are crazy. I mean, Greg, you couldn't say that Yamaha is the strongest team. They've got, obviously Vinales, who's amazing. Rossi hasn't won, has he? So you can't really go into that, think that they're going to be the strongest team. You look at Suzuki. You got two young guys there that I think have the potential to be very strong. I think the bike is coming around, but that's not the strongest team. I don't think you could look at Dovi and Petrucci and say that they're the strongest team. I think Petrucci is still a question mark over race distance.
Well, hold
I
on,
think
Jay. Let me ask you this question:
yeah.
Is racing motorcycles about race wins or championships? What do you think?
Well, for me, it's championships.
Okay, so
always.
with that in mind, if you have Marquez and Lorenzo on the same team, who's the last person to win a championship other than those two? Right?
Lorenzo. Yeah, it's
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying Marquez 100%. And Lorenzo. So who won a championship before those guys? So based on that alone, on the ability to win races, yes, but ability to win championships, I mean, it's not just on paper, Dovi. It's the reality of the situation. I think that you have the strongest team in the paddock. It depends on how you define team, right?
Correct.
I suppose.
Yes. Yep.
Because
Honda's not lacking in engineers or anything. So I don't know.
Right.
When you say right, it's not like Honda's lacking somewhere that Ducati isn't. You're exactly right. When you look at the strongest team, the way the quotes were, it's interesting because he even goes on to says every champion is doing it in a special way. One thing, when he looks at the data, he can see some bad things, but always a special thing to do this in the negative point we will not have next year. Which means to me that Lorenzo went a direction to get that bike, and Lorenzo won on that motorcycle, but it affected Dovi in a negative. But it wasn't like Dovi was winning a bunch of races before Lorenzo started winning races and changed the development of the motorcycle. So it's a very interesting quote. And, talking to you about this even prior to us getting on here, I think the thing that it's really weird because we talk about how riders kind of moan and complain or whine, and Dovi always kind of sneaks these little things in there like that to me, where I go, it'll be interesting. But going back to the strongest team thing, Greg, I agree with you. I don't think that there's I don't think Honda just has the two best riders and they're lacking in team support or team engineers or crew chiefs or money. I think that when you look on paper, if you had $100,000 in your pocket, what other team would you put your money on other than Lorenzo and Marquez?
Yeah, it'd be really difficult to pry that money away and say I'm throwing it on any other team. Or Dovizioso. I mean, the guy hasn't won a world championship since 2004 on a 125, I believe. So, and he's only been on one championship winning team. That's the thing.
Correct.
2011 with Stoner on a Honda. Other than that, all the teams he's been on, other than his own in 2004, I'm talking about in MotoGP when he arrived in 2008, he hasn't been on it. So, yeah, I mean, listen, the other thing is I love the fact that Dovizioso is trying to build confidence within himself to say, hey, on paper, they're the best team, but, we got a good. The problem with MotoGP is very simple. There is no stagnation. I mean, you might have a bike on the factory level on a Honda or Ducati that's the same for 3 races in a row, maybe 4. But then something different is going to show up on that motorcycle. So, yeah, Dovizioso may be talking about the moment, but if they don't have development to keep pace with Honda, then his comment today is not going to hold any water by the time we get to June. You know what I mean? And to be honest, we're going to find out when racing starts who's got the strongest team. And my bet right now, like you're saying, is on the Repsol Honda team, which kind of leads us into that little bit that you were talking about before, Jason, which is Lorenzo, had a gag order. He couldn't talk about anything, wear Repsol colors or anything until the first of the year. So today's the second, and out comes a video. And I watched the video a couple times. He doesn't really say a whole lot, but there were a couple things in there that I thought were interesting. Talking about the Honda Ducati thing is that one of the comments he made was that the Ducati was tall compared to the Honda, and that he feels like he has more confidence going into a corner the lower he is to the ground. So he had a lot of confidence on the motorcycle. The second part that I thought was interesting, he talked about going from the first test to the second test, which was divided by about a week. And he had asked for some changes after the first test, and they had already given them to him by the second test a week later. And he said that he was so impressed that HRC reacted that way to his request, which tells me that wasn't the case on the Ducati team. But other than that, it was pretty standard PR stuff,
If you look at, and again, Greg and I talk all the time, and one of the things that you and I made comments on first thing, even at the test, I said his body position looks different on the bike, which would kind of warrant the fact that the bike does look like it sits a little lower for him. It doesn't look like he has to do as much with his upper body on this bike that he had to do with the Ducati. Kind of Lorenzo's career, he's got off the bike a lot with his upper half of his body hung off a lot more, and on the Honda, he just looks so much more compact. It just looks so much easier for him. I don't think it's going to take him as long to, and I don't want to misconstrue anything because we saw him go fast in tests anyways on the Ducati and then struggle as hard as he did the first year. I don't believe, Greg, and I'd be interested to get your view. I don't believe that he's going to struggle as much on the Honda to get up to speed. I really believe he'll be a race winner this year. I really do believe that. I don't think that it's going to take him a year plus to get up to speed and win on this Honda. I think he's going to do it a lot faster. I think that he's going to be able to take advantage of some of the things that Honda has done over the last couple of years. I don't think it's an easy bike to ride, but we saw Nakagami at the last test get on the a later version than what he's been racing, and he was P1. So I think that the Honda's definitely gotten a little bit easier to ride, and I think that's going to help Lorenzo in a lot of ways.
Have we seen anyone race Marquez heads up week in and week out? We've seen some people race him from time to time, but no one's really been able to bring it to him on a consistent basis. So I think, just looking at that, Lorenzo is probably the guy for the job. And there's no excuses. There's 0.0 because he's on the same equipment, So my deal is how close are they in riding styles, and which way will the development go between those two riders? It's the only question I think that needs to be answered for me. I think you're right. I think both are going to win races. I think it's going to come down to possibly a 1-2 in the championship for Repsol with those two riders. It's just, can Lorenzo get up to speed quick enough, take advantage of as much testing as they possibly can get to get a good baseline setting so he can be competitive week in and week out, and take advantage of the mistakes that Marquez does make from time to time that opens up the door in those championships, or bad luck that Marquez has,
Yep. Well, I think that Marquez is just such a smarter rider than and as the years go, he's going to have to deal with younger guys like he was at one point coming through the ranks. And I think what'll be really interesting, Greg, is after these 2 years play out with Lorenzo, depending on how things go there, and the idea that Marquez is still around, how it will affect once a young guy comes into the team. And kind of Lorenzo's Marquez will be more kind of the senior guy, how it will affect him when a young guy comes in kind of with the same sort of piss and vinegar that he had when he came along, and I don't think he's scared of Lorenzo, and I don't think he's scared of guys getting on that Honda right now that he's already raced against, because he kind of knows who they are and what they're about. I think when a young kid comes along, in another 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, whenever that is, it'll be interesting to see how he reacts. What is Marquez, Greg? Is he 24? 25?
Yeah, 24, 25. Yeah. He's still so young.
Still so young. I mean, it's just all in front of him still, as far as, it'll be interesting to see how the motivation goes and what motivates him to continue to kind of do what he's doing. So, but Lorenzo, I think this year will be amazing on that bike.
So that's a good open to the show, a little bit of GP talk, but let's go ahead and get into the first topic that I wanted to talk about. We've kind of been teasing it for 2 weeks, and I apologize to Peter Johnson, who sent this question in over Facebook, but there was a question raised with regards to the MotoAmerica series, and the question went like this. Peter wrote in and said, I don't get why most MotoAmerica privateer superbike teams race Yamahas when they pay the least in contingency. For example, Josh Herrin made $34,000 from Yamaha with 2 wins, 6 second-place finishes, 4 thirds, and 3 fourths. The same results on a Kawasaki, he would have made $116,000. Yamaha pays $5,000 for first, $2.5 for second, $1.5 for third, $1,000 for fourth, and $500 for fifth. Where Cowie pays $15,000 for a win, $10,000 for second, $5,000 for third, $2,000 for fourth. So, first off, Jason, let's just address why contingency is even around before we dive into this thing. What's contingency there for, and is it a good thing to have in racing?
Well, yeah, I think that when you look at Contingency, we all remember back in the day, like a long, long time ago, when Suzuki with the GSX-R series that they had from 600, 750, and back in the day it used to be a GSX-R 1100s. They used to put up just insane contingency money at every club race around the country. I mean, Greg, I look back at some things that I did when I was very first kind of rolling, and that actually, when I got on a GSX-R, I could go to a club race weekend and make somewhere in around the $4,000 to $5,000 mark at a club race weekend, and it really allowed privateers an opportunity to go out and make money. They'd go buy bikes. A lot of guys would have multiple bikes that they'd be able to go race. And Suzuki really cornered that market when it came to the GSX-Rs back in the day because of the amount of contingency money that was up. Everybody was on GSX-Rs, which then drove other manufacturers to try to kind of up their game, if you will. So it's a part of, and we'll get into this a little bit more as we go. I really think, Greg, that what really we have to talk about is the different classes that you have now, and where does it become worth it to go buy a bike if you're a privateer to go chase the contingency? In other words, when you look at how much Kawasaki paid this year for a win, it looks great on paper, but Kawasaki's involvement in racing has been zero. So it's not like you're going to get a privateer guy go out and buy a Kawasaki just to, unless he's got the resources behind him, okay, to win, because they might jump on a bike where parts are a little bit more accessible. Manufacturer might be a little bit more into the racing side of it to be able to help that person come along. This might be something, I might be getting ahead of myself, but this is why we might see so many Yamahas out there, because Yamaha has been able to provide certain platforms within other teams and structures. So it's great that Cowie is willing to put $15,000 up, but there's really nobody out there that was going to collect that because they don't have the team or the resources behind them to make the Kawasaki what it needs to be to go up and win against Yosh and Yamaha, right?
It's a great PR move in a way. Oh, 15,000 to win, 10,000 for second. And just to kind of reiterate the point, the reason contingency exists is to give people incentive to buy their motorcycle. I'm looking at the grid that I have in front of me that outlines the 2018 contingencies and the way that the different strategies work. So, for instance, if you looked at just win bonuses, Jason, Cowie leads the way with 15,000, but no one other than David Anthony, and raced that bike. Suzuki was 10,000, Yamaha 5,000, Honda 5,000, and BMW, if you raced in Superbike class for the win, was $4,000. So you may look at just the wins and say, "Oh, well, naturally I'm going to ride a Cowie." However, Kawasaki, Yamaha, and Suzuki only pay to fifth place, but Honda and BMW pay all the way down to 10th. So if you're a person who can race in the top 10, you've got to look at the entire picture and say, okay, what do I think I can average? And so the idea there is two things. Number one, contingency exists from manufacturers to drive people to buy their motorcycles. And it also exists to help people, privateers, either get to races, or in the case of Westby, which we're going to find out in a minute, I don't want to give it all away, the money's able to go to the rider directly, or sometimes contingency would be like with a team, if you win 1,000, 500 goes to you, 500 goes to the team. So it just kind of depends on how that works. But that's why contingency exists. It's why the question is being raised. Automatically you think to yourself, yeah, but if you can win this amount of money like Josh Herrin's exclusive. He won a couple races. That's $30,000 just to win it, and then 10,000 each for second. But who else can finish in the top 5 on a consistent basis is really the question.
What did he have behind him, though, Greg?
Stamboli.
He had a great team, and that's the thing is you have a tremendous team behind you with resources. To win a superbike race, it's you could sit there and you go down the line and go, okay, which bike's the best bike bone stock? Well, they're not racing these bikes bone stock, and you have to have a team behind you, and resources behind you are what are going to determine your real results. And it goes back to what we just talked about between Lorenzo and what Dovi says about Honda not maybe making the strongest team. The strongest teams have a tendency to find their way to the top. And, right now in our series, we've got Yosh, which has been around forever, and we got Yamaha, which has been around forever. And we got Stamboli that, he's been around forever, but essentially he's still a privateer team with a ton of resources and that kind of thing. So that's why and they had a great rider in Josh Herrin. That's why they were successful. And we can look at other teams that have all chose the Yamahas as well, which I know you're going to do. But it's the resources behind you, what you actually have, and moving forward. Everybody right now during the off season is trying to improve their product, right? Trying to improve their team. A lot of that will be resourcing the right people to help them within the inner walls of the team itself.
Yeah, for sure. And one team that runs a Yamaha since the team was really began is Westby Racing. So I asked team manager Chuck Giacchetto why run the Yamaha R1 when other brands payout are structured so much differently.
Well, a lot of people might see it as kind of a conflict, obviously, because you want to go racing to make money so you can afford to pay your bills or, frankly, keep up with your addiction. So, but for us, the easiest way to get our fix was to stick with the Yamaha platform, and a couple of reasons. Number one, and first and foremost, as far as Trig was concerned, it's the bike we know best. So that was kind of a trickle down, and it's the truth. And we've had an amazing amount of success with it. We do have a lot of spares, and we have a lot of knowledge about how that bike works. So like for this year, we are changing two major components, but a lot of what's happening and what has happened on the chassis is pretty much going to stay the same. I mean, we're switching the electronics, which obviously could have a great effect or an adverse effect on everything. And we're also changing the swing arm out. We've gone to an aftermarket swing arm. So, but beyond that, the engine configuration, the body work, the spares, the know-how of the techs getting around the thing, the parts ordering processes, everything works really well. And even though we unfortunately don't have the support of Yamalube anymore due to budget restrictions, we still have a relationship with Yamaha Racing, and I'm grateful for that. And our relationship, with Yamaha Racing is more of a technical relationship. I'm not going to go any further into it than that, just because it's nobody's business, frankly. But we share an awful lot of information back and forth with them to make sure that we're staying on the right path. And we will obviously keep purchasing our parts through Yamaha Racing. And we have a nice relationship with those guys. As far as the contingency goes, our contingency, the way we have our deal set with Matt and with Samuel Lockoff, is the rider can take the manufacturer's contingency. It's okay. We don't mind. That being said, it's not the greatest, but nothing's been posted yet for this year, so we don't know. If it stays the same, it still ain't going to be too bad. I mean, you look at Kawasaki, I believe Aprilia, BMW, and Ducati. Those guys are really strong for the first 3 to 5, and it's really good. And we need those bikes on the grid too. But we're sacrificing some extra money that hopefully will go into Matt's pocket and into Samuel's pocket for what we know and what we're comfortable with. Now, I mean, let's face it, there were rumors of us going to Aprilia, and we spoke to all the manufacturers, and some of them had some really good things to say. But at the end of the day, I think when you look at it, Greg, it's a situation where we're very comfortable with the relationship that we have with Yamaha corporate, with Yamaha Racing, and especially Keith McCarty and Tom Halverson. And, the list goes on and on over there. All those guys are all now personal friends of ours. We didn't really take the situation, the situation that happened over there where budget got cut. We know it's nothing personal. I mean, it stings, but those guys still have a long enough reach, and they really have been helping us all along. They've helped us very much so with getting on board with the Magneti Morelli stuff and making sure we didn't go down the wrong path.
That's, kind of a more, higher funded team. They're still a privateer team. They're obviously buying parts from Yamaha, but, that's why those guys decided to go down that road. And it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, as much as since 2009, Yamaha's been a really big presence in the paddock, and you have access to all those people that are in there, and building those relationships and having access to those parts and that technical information is huge in racing.
Well, the thing I got from all of that soundbite from Chuck was technical support. That's it. See, it doesn't matter what brand you're on, because I promise you right now, I guarantee it, without any question, that if somebody like Chuck had a manufacturer, say any one of the three that he talked about between BMW and Cowie or Aprilia, if they came along and said, we have this structure, we're going to tie you right in with our World Superbike team to where you're going to be our main team here in America. We're going to give you exactly what you need as far as technical support. We're going to help fund things. It wouldn't be much for Chuck to go jump onto another brand of motorcycle. But it's the relationship that he has with Yamaha, that the Yamahas themselves, I believe, everybody can get the parts that they want to get to make those bikes competitive. Obviously, Stamboli does his thing. Chuck has done their thing as far as they've won races too. Kyle Wyman also on a Yamaha. You've got these guys that you can make the Yamaha competitive. But it's the resourcing and the information that you have. And right now, Chuck has a foot in the door with Yamaha, obviously, because he's been with them and the relationship is strong with them. The relationship is so strong that the technical side of it with Yamaha, it wasn't worth him jumping to another manufacturer for something so minimal. And the contingency money in this case wasn't strong enough to pull him away to the point where a lot of these teams too, Greg, do you remember back in the day when contracts were getting done, you'd always hear about double and triple contingency from the manufacturer that you're signing with. So they have a posted contingency. They have a posted contingency that's there for the public, for all club racers and things. When you get hooked in with a manufacturer, a lot of times they'll double or triple your contingency for your winnings and your championship bonuses and that kind of thing. Had an Aprilia come to Chuck Chiquetto and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay you $50,000 for a win and on down the line. That's going to definitely start to change his mindset of, okay, if they're going to give us some good resources within, increase our contingency money because we are taking a chance on going with this manufacturer, then that's going to sway him a lot more. But right now, with what's out there, whatever offer they got from Aprilia, as good or as bad as we may think it could be, doesn't matter. It wasn't enough to sway him away from the technical support that he gets from Yamaha to where he knows that when he puts his rider on the grid, he'll be on a bike somewhat the same as Cameron and Garrett so that he can go out and try to win races.
Yeah, and if you move on down the line then to, a little bit of a lesser funded team, you're talking about Stamboli earlier. I had a chance to talk to Richard about this. I don't have a soundbite from him about it, but what was interesting about Richard is he owns Attack Performance, which is a hop-up shop. He makes parts for motorcycles. And the interesting thing to me that Richard said is, as you know, Stamboli has had a contract with Suzuki, he's had a contract with Kawasaki, and he's running Yamahas. Okay, no contract with Yamaha. But the bit that was interesting and the reason why they're running Yamahas, and this, Peter Johnson, this is, part of the answer to the question. The comment he made to me was, if you look across the board at someone who owns a Suzuki GSX-R 1000 or a Kawasaki ZX-10 or Yamaha R1, the group of people that buy his parts, his high-performance parts from Attack Performance, are Yamaha customers. So for him, the decision is more based on what's the direct line of number one development, but also his customer base. He says a lot of people who own Suzukis and Kawasaki's don't buy his parts. They don't buy a lot of performance parts, but for some reason, that Yamaha R1 crowd loves the rear sets and the triple clamps and everything else. So for Richard, it's not only staying on the top of the curve in terms of how motorcycles are developed. We know he's a really smart guy, but from a business standpoint, that's a decision that he conscientiously made to be with or stay on a Yamaha R1. And for him, the contingency money was kind of second for that.
Yeah, but Greg, think about something for me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Mm-hmm.
In the last 7 years in our sport, what two manufacturers have been there the most? You know what they are.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Yamaha and Suzuki.
Yeah.
Out of those two, who's come out with more new product?
New product, number one, for sure. Number two, Jay, is
but Yamaha.
Yamaha,
right?
100%. Yeah. And
then between R6s and R1s and stuff, Yamaha has stayed in the game to the point where it's kept people interested, in the sense that Suzuki, for all intents and purposes, they're running a 15-year-old GSX-R 600 almost. Reality of it is, they've had some updates and things, but the GSX-R 600 is old. The GSX-R 1000 is better. It's better the last 2-3 years, but I wouldn't say it's like off the charts better than what they had prior. It's still quite a bit of the same stuff. But the GSX-R 1000 hasn't really lit a fire under people the way the old GSX-Rs did. When you look at Yamaha, they've stayed more involved, more active. They've promoted more. They came out with the R1 originally when the cross plant crank came out and all that stuff. They basically were comparing their bike to having MotoGP technology involved in it, and that's what got the public really going. And Yamaha did such a tremendous job marketing their product that's why you see so many Yamahas, so many people racing Yamahas, and that's why Stimboli can say something like that as far as the people that are spending the money are the guys on the Yamahas, because Yamaha flooded the market with new product and they never really became stagnant, right? They never really became, I mean, back in when we were riding, Honda was everything. Like Honda was so dominant in every aspect from road racing to motocross, supercross. Everybody wanted to ride red. I mean, that just was the way it was, and everybody else was chasing them. In a sense, Yamaha over the last 6 or 7 years has become that. Everybody's chased Yamahas. You go to a local track day, Greg, or you go to a club race. It's dominated by Yamahas because that they got the FZ07. The R3 thing didn't work out quite to plan, I don't think, for them, but they jumped into that market to try to do something with the 300. Their R6s have been second to none for how many years now, honestly? Probably since 2011, 12.
And they just did an update on one. It was new last year,
And yeah, I mean, Suzuki sprinkled some success in there in the GSX-R, and Kawai's been non-existent. Honda's been truly non-existent. So it's pretty easy to say that the reason why guys like Stimboli can, with what he does for a living, Yamaha guys are buying parts and product because Yamaha they've stayed ahead of technology. They've stayed on top of technology and made new product to drive people towards buying Yamahas.
Yeah. Plus, you have it's not a wide open door, but you have a direct line of communication if you're in the MotoAmerica paddock with Yamaha in Cyprus, which is now transitioning to Marietta, Georgia. But the point too is that if you raced an R1, that Yamaha was more open to having a conversation with you, and because they were there, because Kawai's not there and Honda's not there and so on and so forth. But, as we move down the ladder again, Jason, another rung down is going to be the full-blown privateer, Kyle Wyman. You mentioned him earlier, racing a Yamaha. He's had some success on the podium 2 years ago. And, a very low-budget team. He makes it work, but it's low budget. So, as we start to get down and the contingency means more to the team, that's when I, looking at that privateer effort, Kyle Wyman can always use the money. So I asked him, why did he race a Yamaha for 2018?
Well, I think for our team, you have to look back a couple years because last year, as far as contingency goes, it wasn't a good year for me. I only finished one time in the money, and that was at the first round. So for us, it's looking back, I've been on a Yamaha since 2009, pretty much exclusively except for the Harleys. And it was kind of a thing where, hey, we've been on one. We understand how ordering parts works. We know people at Yamaha. And until we had a real reason to go elsewhere, we've kind of just stuck with it. When I went to Superbike in 2016, Yamaha elected to pay their contingency top 5 in Superbike. And that was regardless of whether like a Superstock 1000 finished ahead of me or not. And being my first year in Superbike, that was a big help because, even if I was, 6th or 7th or 8th on track, I still kind of finished in the money. And that year there was not really a lot of Superbikes. So that was really why for us. And, I work with Yamaha Champions Riding School. So there was just some good things going with Yamaha. I've done some product shoots with Yamaha. I did their product launch for their 2018 models. So there's just been a lot of reasons to stay with Yamaha.
I thought that's a great soundbite because it goes back to what you and I just talked about, okay? Because he had a relationship there since 2009, And if you remember in 8, 9, 10, 11, our series was pretty much in the tank. It was completely not good at all. So, and he was on an R6. But that's because Yamaha had new product. He generated a program around a Yamaha because that was the bike to be on back then, even in 11 and 12 and all that. That was the bike to be on, wasn't it? Other than when he rode the Harley. But why did he ride the Harley? Money. So when you look at what Kyle says, this is a journeyman guy who busts his ass to put a team in the paddock. I can't stress enough like how hard this kid works at what he does, being a rider and a hands-on guy at the track, right? I mean, you and I have both seen it, and I have such a tremendous amount of respect for Kyle. And then he works for Yamaha Champion Schools too, because why? Because Yamaha was involved. Yamaha started a program, started a school. Yamaha was involved. Here's a young kid riding an R6 on a Yamaha who puts himself out there to try to make a living as a motorcycle rider, racer, whatever. And Kyle's very proactive in that sense. So when he jumped on the Superbike, he had a special side project as far as contingency goes for him that made sense for him to stay on a Yamaha because of the relationships that he's built and so on and so forth. So again, it goes back to Yamaha has been completely enwrapped with things over the last 5-6 years. And we know that they got some struggles right now. We know that.
Yeah.
But the thing is that Yamaha laid the foundation many, many years ago for people to not get away from Yamaha. And Kyle Wyman's an example that you can use where even now, the resources he has, I know he works very closely with Gary Dean, another super sharp guy in our paddock. They have the potential of doing better. And I think that might be why he's looking a little bit somewhere else because, like you said, Greg, he made contingency at the first race this year. That is it.
Mm-hmm.
And if Yamaha right now is struggling a little bit, they might not be able to resource as much to Kyle or put up a big enough contingency effort for a privateer kid like himself. That might be why he might start to look at other places.
And, I asked him too, if he looked at the results and the other contingency payouts that are available in 2018, what did that look like?
Yeah, the big one I looked at was BMW, and I think I would have made an extra $36,000 in BMW money. And I say extra because I think I only made $1,000 in Yamaha money this past year. So yeah, quite a big difference for sure. That's a pretty good chunk of my budget for the whole year. So yeah.
So you can hear it in his voice too, right?
Yeah, you can.
36,000 versus $1,000. Yeah.
But you can't. The thing is, and that Kyle will think about as well, is that you can't go into it thinking that. How do we know the BMW is as good of a bike as the one he's on, to where he could finish in the same spots to actually make the money that he would have made if he'd have been on a BMW? That said, he does have great resources behind him. I think what would be incredible is if we see Kyle on a BMW next year. I think I've seen some Instagram stuff with him on a Ducati. Whatever the reasons are, if he decided to go the Ducati route, I hope that he's got a big sponsor behind him, and I hope that maybe Ducati would jump in and help him more than some of the deals that I've heard regarding the Ducati program. I know that there's a lot of teams that have been offered the Ducati program, but it costs a lot of money. The BMW to me I feel like BMW is more proactive now, and his brother raced a BMW in Superstock 1000 last year. There might be something there where there could be a relationship started. But I think if Kyle could test a BMW, get it on track, ride it, he may have already done some of this, and I just don't know about it. But that would be the viable source, I think, or reason for him to go. We saw last year, Scheibe had the BMW with Danny Eslick on it. Steve Scheibe ran the BMW. I think it's got potential. I think the new bike's going to be even better. And then we can start looking at some of those 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th that Kyle had this year that could have paid him some money. That $36,000 would be a big boost for him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge boost. That pays for travel and hotels and some things like that. So tire bill, whatever. The thing is that money would be good. It would get another manufacturer on the bike. And I think Kyle would work hard to get all that done.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. I mean, and contingency, we're talking about Superbike, but it really comes across the board. like I know a guy still named Billy Eisenacher, Jay, who used to race like Southeast region, and he would buy bikes specifically based on contingency, what was available. And he was pulling in, in one year he told me he was making over $100,000 a year. Just, we call it poaching contingency, right? But that's because Billy knew he could win. At this level, you can't just go on like talent and say, I have a general knowledge of suspension and I can go and win races and do that. And that's where, Kawasaki posts their contingency at 15,000 for a win. And you're like, hubba hubba. But what's the reality? Now,
you still got to win.
Still got to win.
Still got to win. Well, it looks good.
But the contrast to that, which is very interesting, is, let me ask you this question. When Andrew Lee in Stock 1000 decided to race a Kawasaki, did you think, because you know Andrew, that he would have the type of season that he did on that Kawasaki? Meaning, was he more along the lines of the Billy Eisenacher who felt that he could go out and put the thing on the box consistently, or did he buy the Cowie just giving himself the chance just in case it ended up like that?
Well, look, it's going to sound biased because Andrew's one of the kids I've been so fortunate enough to work with. But the thing about Andrew is he had a little bit of connection with Cowie, with Derek Keys. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he had that resource that we talk about. But Andrew Lee is untapped to me in the sense that he's such a quiet, unassuming guy, and he's very, very good. And I think that when he looked at it, two things came clear. He felt like with the resources he had, buying a Kawasaki and knowing how good the product is and what it's done around the world. I mean, Kawasaki around the world, not just with World Superbike with Johnny Ray and stuff. I mean, BSB, it won the championship. Around the world, the Kawasaki's good in both Superbike and Superstock trim. Then you look at the amount of contingency money that was there to be made. It was a pretty easy decision for Andrew, I think, to jump on that Kawasaki. And the contingency obviously helped him quite a bit throughout the year. But if you're asking me specifically about like Andrew, I think Andrew is. I did expect him to do as well as he did. I mean,
okay. Well, the reason I bring it up,
him to do that well.
The reason I bring it up, Jay, is because Stock 1000 had 8 races, all right, versus Superbike that had 20. Josh Herrin pulled in with his great results, $34,000. Andrew Lee with Kawasaki Contingency, which is in Stock 1000, 5,000 for a win, 4,000 for second, and he got 1 5th place finish, which was $1,000. He earned $32,000 in 8 races. So.
And that's for our listeners. That's 8 races. That's not 8 weekends. Like Greg is saying, it's Josh Herrin was running 2 races a weekend.
Right.
Andrew was running 1 race a weekend.
Right.
And you can't argue $32,000. I mean, he made $32,000 and Herrin made 30. What did you say? Herrin made $34,000.
34,000.
So,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he raced some would argue like over 2 times the amount of times that Andrew did.
Now, one thing I want to throw in there with Andrew, Jay, is you need to throw in MotoAmerica contingency because they actually pay for places too. And so if you add in the MotoAmerica contingency, which he earned $38,250 all told, just in Cowie contingency and MotoAmerica contingency. So, I mean, listen, it costs a lot to go racing. But I think anybody's going to take $38,000 that's going to help towards their program. I know Kyle Wyman would have loved it. So that's the thing when I look at it, to answer this question, it's so convoluted when Peter asked that question because it just means something completely different. If you are, say, a Max Flinders, for example, who hasn't placed in the top 10, maybe he's got a couple of them, right? You got to say to yourself,
probably, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you got to say to yourself, okay, so Max, and I've reached out to Max. I just didn't get an answer about why he was racing, the Yamaha. But, he's going to consider things differently. He's not racing a Yamaha to say, oh, I'm going to go beat the factory Yamahas and Suzukis. So he's doing it for different reasons, resources, or it's the bike that he had.
Easiest bike to get on.
Yeah, easiest bike to get on, those types of things. So, again, I'm speculating with Max, but.
Yep, but going back to the Andrew thing, the biggest problem for Andrew now is he's won that championship and he could try to come back and defend it. And I actually haven't spoke to him too much about this in the last, say, 6 to 8 weeks. But if there was a Kawasaki team, it would have been a pretty natural transition to hope that Andrew would get looked at or picked up. He's a young kid that showed that he could win. I mean, he won out here in California. He won 2 of the major club race championships as well, both at Chuckwalla and AFM, the AFM championship. So he's definitely, and he's branching out too, going and doing a little world endurance at Suzuka. I mean, this is a kid that if Kawasaki had a team that could help groom him, he could be a tremendous superbike rider, really, really good. But he's a privateer kid doing it on his own. Gets help from dad. Derek Keyes has obviously helped him quite a bit. But yeah, it's. I think it's great that Peter asked you this question, because look what it's done. It's literally let us run on about it for 30 minutes or so. But now, hopefully Peter will understand, and the rest of our listeners, that there's so much more to just throwing up a big number as a manufacturer and saying, why don't you come ride our bike, because we're gonna give you this much amount. So
yeah. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Peter, for the question.
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah. Speaking of MotoAmerica, and I know we've already talked to him a little bit, but did Westby Racing, did they test this week, Greg?
Yeah, they did a couple days ago.
Last week?
Yeah. Well, I don't even. Wednesday? Yeah, it was like Sunday, I think, maybe. They went. Well, that was the thing. There was a rumor going around that they were going out for their first test to actually have the bike on track with the new Magneti Morelli. Their rider, Matthew Skoltz, is still in South Africa. So anyway, when I was on the phone with Chuck, Jason, I asked him that exact same thing. We think exactly alike. I said, rumor has it that you guys went testing, and here's what he said.
Yeah, it's true for sure. Our new electronics ace, Herschel Auger, accompanied technical director and crew chief extraordinaire, Ed Sullivan. They went down, just met each other down there for the day at an open track day, and turned a handful of laps very successfully. The cell phone reception there is horrible, and it's probably pretty good because I was calling repeatedly and getting no answer. But at the end of the day, Ed called me and said, look, we had a very successful outing. Everything worked on the motorcycle with the exception of the lap timer, which is very important. It's crucial. So Herschel was kind of pulling his hair out with that one. But they were able to pan through all the rider's aids, all the features. And I don't want to say I know because I don't know for a fact, but from what Ed was describing to me, Herschel would make some really severe adjustments to the motorcycle so Ed could feel them. And then he would let Ed paddle through them on his laps to get his feedback, but to make sure that things were working correctly. And from what I gather, in every way, all of those features worked amazingly well. And the changes that were set up in the ECU upon delivery, just with the base maps, were very, very good, which for me, I was super excited. I mean, it's the best New Year's present you can have. So just as a base, as delivered, the thing is really good at this moment. Now, when I talk to other guys in the industry and I share that with them, they said, right, but when Matt gets on it, it could be totally different. And I said, in what respect? And they said, well, he's going to be pushing. So we doubt very much that the setup that you have now will be as good or any better than the setup that you ran last year, which was a little shocking to me. But in the end, the way they explain it back to me, it's not, because we're starting over from zero. The good thing is Matt already knows what it's like to go fast on that bike and what he likes. So Herschel and Ed are pretty sure they can get him back up to that place, and then more so as we go on. So, 3 cheers to the fellas. Really good to ring in the new year with that. I think they're going to go down 1 or 2 more times to Jennings, and then we're supposed to get Matt back before the 31st of the month, and then we're gonna put the hammer down. Now, I did want to say that to you personally, that the invite still is live. We won't cancel it, for you to come down and toss a leg over the bike for a few laps at one of our test sessions. I'd love for you to be able to feel it and either brag about it or...
Oh, shucks. I was supposed to edit that part out. Yeah.
That in and of it, I get it, Chuck. Like, you want G-Dub to come ride your bike. I'm not sure the reason. Maybe they want to get some of that expert feedback, right, Greg? I mean, I know that
you hear that, Jason. That's baby making music right there.
Have you? I know you're on your diet, especially after last night's ice cream cake. I'm sure
it was a birthday in the household. I had no choice, not mine.
Right. Hey, Greg, you know the thing I found out about listening to that little soundbite you did with Chuck there? It goes right back to our contingency talk, doesn't it? The resourcing. He's got Herschel down there.
Dude, Herschel.
Working on the bike.
Yeah.
And right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Hirsch
there you
go.
Is a that's stud. How a team.
Hirsch is a stud.
That's how you get better, because you have the ability to get these guys around, and now they've kind of given the bike a good shakedown already now. So,
I was thinking about Jason.
Guys
can you imagine if
always working?
Can you imagine if Davy Jones, who's crew chief for Josh Herrin, coming up for 2019, was like, yeah, I just went out and spun a few laps on the thing just to shake it down for you. But that it's also like what you're saying. It is like Hirsch is a great resource, but Ed is also a really good resource. He's a former 100%. Rider and fast, and you go, hey, look, what do we have available to get us, to do this job? And so they go, okay, great. Let's just go down. And Ed threw his leathers on and he went out and did some laps. And the biggest thing, I think, like Chuck was saying, the bike runs, and we know that with Magneti Morelli, that's the biggest hurdle, is making sure that thing runs right. And then you start tweaking from there. So yeah, shucks. I'm really wish I had edited that out. Oh, one more note. Back in 2007, Jason, when I rode for the factory Yoshimura team, Herschel.
Is that the race that you didn't qualify?
Herschel was my data guy.
Wait, what on the Yosh bike? So it was a short weekend for Hirsch.
It was a short weekend for us all. It was one of those 2-day events, so there wasn't a lot of qualifying.
Yeah, okay.
There wasn't. Yeah. So anyway, that's our MotoAmerica talk. How about that? We'll just wrap up the MotoAmerica talk on there. But Jason, listen, man, coming up here this weekend is the beginning of one of my favorite racing seasons, because it's wintertime and I love it, and that is Supercross right around the corner. So we've got to talk a little bit about Supercross. I wanted to start off by just saying, just kind of going over the schedule. 17 races. It starts, of course, with Anaheim 1. Then they go to Phoenix, and then it's Anaheim 2, then to Oakland, and to San Diego. Minneapolis, February 9th, and then they're going to be in AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. Then they're going to Detroit, Atlanta, Daytona for that very interesting kind of outdoor motocross, supercross hybrid that we always see. And then to Indianapolis, Seattle, Houston, Nashville, Denver, and then to MetLife Stadium, and they wrap things up in May in Vegas at Sam Boyd Stadium. So, Jason, you and I are not Supercross experts by any stretch of the imagination, but we certainly love the sport, don't we?
Well, yeah. I mean, I love watching Supercross. I think that what it always represented for me is the start of the racing season. So you get this kind of like Christmas is over, New Year's is over, the winter break is over. The big thing about the motocross guys, Supercross guys, is they never have really an off season ever. It's the money they make is so well earned and deserved. A lot of guys will talk about how much money that motocross guys are making. They earn it because they never really have time off. They're always busting their asses, these guys. So Supercross Anaheim 1 specifically always gets the big hype because it's A1 and that's what it's known as. And going out and doing well in A1 doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the greatest year, but it's kind of the one that everybody circles at the beginning of the year, and it's impossible almost to get industry tickets for it. By that I mean free tickets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody wants to go to A1. And I think that when you look at the Supercross over the last 3, 4, 5 years, it seems like we haven't had as many big personalities as we had back from the McGrath, and you kind of the McGrath and then Carmichael and James Stewart and these kind of guys. The guys maybe even in the realm of social media, it's not quite as what's the word I'm looking for? Personality driven. I think when you look at the defending champion right now, Jason Anderson, it's really weird because nobody speaks about Jason being like the greatest. But I remember when he was riding the Rockstar Suzuki, I didn't even know who he was, and I loved watching him ride because it always just looked like he was trying. He always looked very kind of old schoolish, obviously with the jersey hanging out the back, and the kid just works really hard, and he put together a season last year. I think he won 4 races, Greg, won the championship.
Yep.
And the majority of his points were at the beginning of the year when he was winning races and so on. He didn't win a race, I think, for the last half of the season. So that championship, though, is so gnarly because of you got to be consistent and you got to stay away from injury. Those guys race every weekend every weekend but one, I think, isn't it, Greg? They have like one weekend off.
I think so, yeah.
From now till like May.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's it. When you look at the title contenders, for sure, Jason Anderson tops the list. You have Eli Tomac, who won a lot of races but injured himself early. You have Ken Roczen. Ken is definitely, being around the motocross paddock for a couple of years. I was doing some PA announcing for that series on and off a couple of years ago. Ken's definitely the guy with amazing personality, but he's kind of, coming back again from another arm injury. And then you got to look at the Frenchman Marvin Muscan, he doesn't quite have a complete package, Marvin, just yet. He just keeps struggling with those whoops. And we know the whoop section is it's big in Supercross, So I know that there's been chat about him working with David Villeman, ex, Supercross racer who's his coach and he's good in the whoops. But, you're right, Jason. I think that really Supercross, in contrast to road racing, is really about how do you stay healthy the first half of the season, at least. I mean, let alone the entire season, and healthy enough to race. Supercross, in a way, is more like football. By the time the season ends, every single person who plays has got some type of little injury, some bumps and bruises. I think Supercross is very similar. And, you're looking at it like you're saying. I mean, you're talking about a Supercross schedule where most of these riders are off on Sunday. Maybe some take Monday off, but they go home to wherever their homes are. Eli's in, Colorado, for instance. And I'm not sure where Jason stays, down in Florida a lot of the time, I think, with Alden Baker and that deal, but originally from New Mexico and still rides out there. But they get off those bikes, and these teams based, say, in California, or, JGR is based in Charlotte, they'll ship suspension and they'll ride their suspension that they race on. And so they're out there riding every single day, unlike us on road racing side. It's like a scheduled test and a track day. I mean, those riders ride so much that
all the time. And that's and the tracks that they ride, the test tracks that they ride are every bit as gnarly as what they're riding, obviously, is on Saturday nights when they're racing. So the potential for injury is so high in that sport that if you could stay healthy, and I think that when you look at it, like you look at like a Ryan Dungey, it's really weird to me that Ryan Dungey doesn't get kind of spoke about as one of the greats. Like when I say that, I mean, they just put a lot of different guys in front of him. And because he wasn't the flashiest guy, but the guy stayed consistent. He won races. He won a lot of races, but he stayed consistent, stayed away from injury, and won championships because of that. And that's the kind of guy I would want on my team, a guy who can stay healthy. And last year, Jason Anderson did that. I think that when he rides very seat of the pants, very technical guy, but he's very seat of the pants as well. But he stays away from the big crashes. And I think when you look at on paper the last 2 years, Eli Tomac looked like the guy that would be he would win it all. And I think going into 19, kind of the same thing. Like Eli looks like he should be the guy on paper that can just go ahead and run the table and win the championship. But he has a tendency to make small errors, little mistakes, and
that turn into huge injuries.
Or two.
He makes little mistakes that turn into huge injuries. I mean, Tomac's won half of the Supercross races in the last 2 years. There's no doubt the guy's the hands down the fastest motorcycle racer day in and day out. But just being the fastest doesn't win you championships. And at the end of the day, it was pretty funny because, Jay, I was watching Racer X and the guys, Mathis and Wygant, were there at the desk, and they were talking about a topic that was, what's more important, winning races or winning championships for your legacy? What's your view on that?
Well, championships are always going to be the thing for me. There's no question, because you can take a championship even if you've only won one or two championships in your life. At the end of the day, they can't ever erase that. Nobody ever gets introduced as 22-time race winner, blah blah blah. It's always 2, 3, 4-time champion.
Right. The only race you could win that has note would have been the Daytona 200, right? Like, that, like, there's some people that have made a career.
If you win a big race like that, agreed. And I think that, I remember, and I know you'll tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe I'm right. 1998, Ben Bostrom won the Superbike championship, and he never won a race.
99.
Was it 99?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Right?
Okay.
Is that right?
I don't know. I thought he rode Ducati in 99. I could be wrong.
With the number 1 plate on it?
I think so. Anyways, I know you'll go back and look. But
he won it the same year.
I still
Richie
remember who won the
Alexander
championship.
Yeah, I have to go look at it.
I still remember that he won the championship.
Absolutely.
I couldn't tell you who won the most races that year.
Nope, neither could I. We can't even decide what year it is. But I know he won the championship, and on his resume, he's always going to be AMA Superbike champion.
And if I got this right over you, I mean, like, I know you are the stat guy, but I believe it was 98. I think he was on the Honda, and then he got signed by Ducati to ride the Ducati, I believe, in 99. Anyways, it doesn't matter. The thing is that for me, I believe that you always remember who won championships. And if you're a Matt Mladen or a Mick Doohan or a Rossi or those guys that have won multiple races, but they've also won championships. So, and I think that Eli, I think this has got to be his year. He's proven that he's the fastest guy. He's got a new teammate this year, Joey Savacci, coming up from the 250 class this year. If we go down and we look at a couple, look at the main players in the 450 class, Joey Savacci will be a rookie this year in 450s. So it'll be interesting to see how he kind of gets himself going. You got Justin Brayton and Vince Friese on the Moto Concepts Honda team. Again, I think Brayton's just come back from racing in Australia and so on. Barsha and a guy I really like, Aaron Plessinger. I really like him. I think that the 450, Aaron's a bit taller. We talk about whoops and all that. I think that having those big long legs in the past has always proven to be a huge benefit to riders that have a little bit bigger stature. I think Plessinger is a quiet, unassuming guy as well. I think that he's the kind of guy that could come out and shock some people kind of right off the bat. You got Marvin Muscan and Cooper Webb. Cooper Webb's a bit of a mystery to me. I mean, he did as well as he did in 250s, and it goes again, Greg, got to have the right fit, right pieces. Gets on the factory Yamaha team and really was non-existent. I know he had a lot of injuries and so on.
And there was talk that the bike wasn't the perfect bike, you know what I mean, kind of thing.
For him,
yeah.
Specifically, yeah. And it could be, that could go along with crew chiefs. It can go along with whatever. But, he's going to be on a 2-year deal with KTM, I believe. So you look at that. Another guy who I thought was really good last year that was Blake Baggett, riding for the Rocky Mountain KTM team. I think that Blaggett and Benny Bloss, who also rode really well. Benny's another big, tall guy. I never met him, but he's, big, tall guy.
He's out, by the way, Jay.
Is he get hurt?
ACL a couple days ago. Snapped it. He's out.
Okay,
he's out
so
for the season.
I did read that. Yeah, that sucks. So he'll be ready for outdoor then, hopefully.
Yeah.
And this opens up an opportunity, but that opens up opportunities because there's guys like Dean Wilson and such that I think Dean Wilson, you could look at Josh Grant. There's some guys out there kind of on the list as far as who could jump in. So, and I'm not sure yet if anybody has jumped in to fill those shoes yet for Benny on the for Supercross for KTM for the Rocky Mountain team. But then you got the Rockstar Energy Husqvarna team with Josh Anderson. And how about Zach Osborne? Zach Osborne coming from 250s as well, has raced over in Grand Prix, as we know, then starts winning championships here. He was hurt, didn't do the outdoor season. It was shoulder for him, wasn't it, Greg? I think he hurt his shoulder.
I believe so, yeah.
During the outdoor. So he's on 450 now. So,
and you got to throw this name out there because you can't count him out. It's Chad Reed. Chad Reed now on the JGR Suzuki factory bike. And I just think that if, I think Chad is pretty healthy. I don't talk to him that often, but every now and then. And so if you have a healthy, because I remember going into the season last year, Chad had been hurt and didn't have much time to get prepared for the Supercross. And he was kind of like working his way through fitness as the season went on, which is really difficult to do in Supercross, especially if you have a little tip over here or there. But, I think Chad is someone even at his advanced age, and I'm sure that he's going to appreciate that, but even at his advanced age is going to, I think, be somewhere. I predict this season, rumor is Suzuki's pretty good. He's really moved a lot of his life up to the Charlotte area to be near the team. He does a lot of testing. I know his place is up for sale. I think his head's in a good space right now, and wouldn't surprise me if he's able to sneak in on a couple of podiums this season. It's hard to say, though, because if you look across all those names that you mentioned, the Supercross 450 field is so thick with talent. I mean, it really is. But, I think everybody's going to be chasing, Tomac, unless Roczen can somehow show up really healthy, because Roczen is unbelievable. He's an unbelievable motorcycle rider. I just wonder if from these injuries he's had in the last couple seasons that it might be over for Ken, but I hope not, because he was spectacular to watch.
I mean, what that guy went through, following his story on Instagram for the last couple of years, and seeing, the horrendous.
Never thought he'd race again, honestly. You know what I mean? Looking at
guy's a stud.
He's a stud.
Guy's a stud. I'll tell you another guy I like is Justin Hill. I like him on the Yoshimura Suzuki too. I think he, when he jumped on the 450, when he was doing 250 West Coast, he went and did some East Coast races on the 450 and was extremely fast. So I think Bogle will be. Justin Hill will be another guy. Justin Bogle doesn't have a ride right now. Who was on that team?
Bogle's filling in for Benny Bloss, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, he is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So yeah, it's
so it'll be interesting.
And that's the hardest thing about Supercross, honestly, and motocross is keeping up with all these things. Injuries happening, on a Wednesday, and they're out, and it's funny. I went to look at the entry list, and I'm like, well, this isn't going to be an entry list until we actually turn wheels on the racetrack on Saturday.
On Saturday, yeah, because you just never know. And it's all about, now these guys are in. I was looking this morning, even on Instagram, a lot of them are breaking in their actual race bikes. Right now, they're actually breaking in their race bikes. As far as, I saw a great photo of Justin Brayton here a little while ago of him just talking about breaking in his race bike for Anaheim. So these guys are all stoked to get their season started. So I'll go out on a limb. I'll say that I do believe this is the year that Tomac gets it done. Okay. I think he's a little bit like Marquez in regards to a number of things with me. I always feel like he wins those outdoor championships because he wins when he can win. He's so head and shoulders above those guys on the outdoor stuff. Musquin tried to keep up with him this year, and I think Marvin's tremendous. And I can't discredit Jason Anderson. I think that Tomac is the guy this year, though. I think that, well, what I thought he would do over the last 2 years, hopefully he doesn't prove us wrong.
Well, we're going to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, because we're going to play some Supercross fantasy.
I hear about
this. We're going to play some Supercross fantasy. So we decided that we're going to play the Rocky Mountain ATV MC fantasy this year. You can find that at rmfantasysx.com. Now, I do have a group. It's Greg's Garage Pod. Jason and I will belong to it. It can only take like 5 people in there. So if a couple people jump in, great. But if you wanted to check out our group, it's going to be Greg's Garage Pod. It's going to be our little team. And so we're going to start picking. We're going to start picking. We won't pick now, Jay, but we'll talk about our picks. I think we need to get at least one race under our belt to see where everyone is. One of the big question marks I think for Tomac is going to be, all new KX 450 on that Kawasaki. So do they have that thing sorted out or not? I think he spun a wheel like back in September on that thing. So they might have it all sorted out, but there might be some little things, setup things that they have to work into that might open the door for some big point grabs early on in this season. So, not to give it to Eli by any stretch of the imagination. The good thing about Supercross is you just don't know. And this is why why you don't pick, I can pick fantasy for football. As soon as the games are over and they open up fantasy picks, I could pick it. With Supercross, I have in my calendar alarm set to 3 hours before the window closes to pick, because I've got to check injury updates, lap times, whatever's possible to do Supercross fantasy. So you in?
Yeah, I'm in. I gotta get on it. I got to get on it and download it. You sent me the link last night. I looked at it. I think I listened to what they're doing. I think it's pretty cool. Obviously, we've done some stuff with MotoGP. Yeah. We have our own little kind of fantasy thing, and so it'll be fun. And it really does make the races a lot more fun to watch as the year goes. So they have a wild card pick, which pays as much as the winner in the Rocky Mountain ATV MC Fantasy thing this year. So it'll be fun to watch. Mm-hmm. So I think one last thing, since we've talked all this motorcycle stuff. How about them Eagles making it to the playoffs, Greg? You got to be proud of my Eagles.
Even a blind squirrel gets a nut from time to time. Do I have to be proud of your Eagles? Did you say, do I have to be proud of your Eagles?
You got to be. Dude, you were at the home opener this year. You actually wore a Philadelphia Eagles hat and all that stuff. And
that is unconfirmed. You singing the song. You sing a song? I don't know the lyrics to it.
You're singing the Philadelphia
You were
Eagles,
singing it, and all I was singing was Tom Brady, Tom Brady, Tom Brady.
Gotta thank Raj, because Roger Lee and I were texting back and forth.
Raj Hayden, yeah.
Unconfirmed rumors were that Raj actually went into the Chicago Bears locker room and
had a pep talk.
Yeah, told them that got to beat Minnesota so that Jason's Eagles can get into the playoffs. So I got a big thanks out to Raj.
Well, no thanks to Oakland for not beating Kansas City. I don't want to talk about it. We're the number 2 seed. We got to bye this week. The Patriots, whatever, football talk. All right, enough with this. All right, so now we're
enjoy the playoffs and enjoy your week, and Happy New Year to
Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for checking us out, and we'll be back next week talking about Supercross and more road racing stuff. So see you then. Later.